So I've done a couple days of brainstorming, gathering all my materials together and actually looking at where I'm going with this. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I thought that I was not going to do the process that I'm going to teach you how to do, but just start in the middle, because I thought I'd done loads of research. I was kind of not sure where I was going. But then when I started looking at the material, I realised, no, I had to do the process that I am teaching you to do, which serves me right for thinking I should do it another way. And actually it proved to myself, again, that I know the process works. Why would I not do it for myself if I teach everyone? That's stupid. Anyway, just so I can walk you through what I've done so far. So I printed out all the materials that I've already done, and I have quite a lot, as I mentioned, because I've been writing this on and off for about a year. I also have been teaching essay writing for a long time, doing essay writing myself, so it's not something I'm unfamiliar with. But one of the things that's interesting about doing this course is that I really have to analyse what I do, how I do it, what I mean, in a much more conscious way than I would if I were teaching, because when I'm teaching, I know what needs to be done, and then I know the process to get the students there. But it's more unconscious rather than conscious. But when you're doing teaching, the difference between learning and teaching is that when you're learning, sometimes it starts off as passive and then it becomes much more active. Whether when you're teaching, you need to be a good teacher, I think anyway, and what I've had from my own experience is that to be a good teacher, you need to be conscious of what you do and why you do it, which is also the process of learning to think and read critically. You'll become conscious of what writers do, how they do it, what they're doing, so that you can understand it, evaluate it, analyse it, and draw your own conclusions. So what I did that made me realise, I need to actually go back to my original way, my time-tested, tested on other people way of doing things. The thing I teach my students is go back. So what I did was I went through all my material, I laid it out all on the floor, and then I did a brainstorm. And this was brainstorming, what have I done already? Where am I going with this course? The problem that I am identifying, and then going into the content. What's this course going to look like? What are the key skills that I need to talk about that my students, whoever's taking this course, that you need to know to be able to write a good and effective essay? And one of the things that was really interesting was the critical thinking and critical reading side of it is like the pivotal, the key skill that is not taught in schools. Well, not really, not in a way that will get you, if you're looking at it in terms of grades, get you those really high grades. I mean, some people do it and they take what's in school and they can get those high grades. But even those students who are getting A's, A stars or 9s for GCSE, that level is still not good enough for GCSE if you're going to go into A level. It's still not enough, and I feel that the way it's taught at GCSE, it kind of limits students because there's a misunderstanding in how you should structure a piece of writing, even though the mark scheme all talk about, here is what we expect of you, and what they expect in the mark scheme is good analytical writing. But for some reason that I feel is not being produced. And also there is a lack of classes and lessons and focus on what is critical thinking and reading, and potentially that's because it's not built into the national curriculum, so it's not going to be talked about in schools. There's lots of other things to talk about and do in schools, because you're not just doing English, you're doing math, science, etc. But it's also not really talked about at A-level or international baccalaureate, so when you're 17 to 18. It's talked about at university, but usually it's separate subjects, and you are doing critical reading and thinking, but you're not conscious that you're doing. But I found when you're more conscious of what you're doing, you're able to utilize those tools and develop them in a much more targeted way, which makes it much faster for your own development. So, as I mentioned, I went back to my original way of doing things, and so I started with a general brainstorm of critical thinking. Here's what I knew already. Here's my approach, what students need to notice. And I went back to definitions because I was like, well, I know what thinking, reading, and critical means, or at least I think I do. And that's the thing about critical thinking, critical reading. You need to take your own opinion out of it. You need to take your own mind out of it and look at it as objectively as you can. What is the text saying? What does the word mean? Outside of, don't put your own views into it. So I went back to the dictionary. So I got just went on Google, because actually I do have a dictionary behind me, but I forgot that I had one. So I just went on Google, Oxford English Dictionary, and I looked at the definition of reading. So have you ever thought what the definition of reading is? Well, the definition of reading is to look at or comprehend the meaning of written or printed matter by interpreting the characters or symbols of which it is composed. So that is literally the letters. You're interpreting that. It also says discover information by reading it in a printed or written source. So that's reading. It's about the discovery of information and then looking to understand it through the letters that are used to make up words. And it's nothing to do with our opinion at this point. And you might think, well, that's strange, because everybody asks me, well, at school, I need to know your opinion, you need to give a balanced argument, you tell me what this says. Well, it's true, but the first initial phase is reading. You need to know what the material is saying and what the writer is explaining or describing before you can actually go and look at it and evaluate it. And then I looked at, well, what's the definition of thinking or to think? And you think, well, I know what thinking is. It's, thoughts in your brain. You just do that. Well, actually, to think is to direct one's mind towards someone or something, use one's mind actively to form connected ideas. It makes it so much, to think is a very active thing to do. And I think that is important to note, because thinking's hard work. If you've really thought, if you've really processed a lot of information, you're going to get tired and your brain is going to feel like it's hurting. That means that you're working, and your brain is a muscle. It needs to work to be used to get better. If you're not using your brain, if you're not pushing it, you're not developing it, and you can feel it because you've got too much energy in your brain and it's just like there's space, or it just doesn't feel active or agile enough. And that might be a strange thing, but the more your brain works, the quicker you can process information and evaluate whether it's useful, valuable, or truthful. Then, critical. Now, the misunderstanding with critical is that the word has been appropriated and is usually associated with negative comments. It doesn't actually mean that. So, critical means expressing or involving an analysis of the faults and merits of work of literature, music, or art. So, but you can also be critical of, and by this I mean the analysis of the fault and merits. You're looking at the good and the bad, the pros and the cons. You're not just looking at what's bad about it. There is what's good too, and you're looking at, is it useful? Is it valid? Is the author saying what they have tried to say in a good way, in a bad way? You're asking all these questions, and why? What's the author looking for? What's their purpose in writing? So that is how we're being critical. And when you're reading critically, when you're thinking critically, you're putting that together. And you're asking questions, and it really does stem to asking questions. That's even if you have no idea how to read or think critically, and you will do if you take my course, or at least by the end of it, you can start with asking questions. And if you don't know how to start asking questions, well, think, what are the words that you use to ask questions? Well, it's who, what, when, why, how, when, where, all of the 5. No, 6. 5 W words one each word. So when, what, who, why, where, how. Just put those in front of any sentence, and then that turns it into a question. Notice your reactions to things and then ask a question about it. Look at what's obvious. Why is it obvious? Have you made an assumption? So that's really what it is. When you're reading and thinking critically, it starts with being aware of oneself and asking questions of the text, because you need to take yourself out. You need to take whatever ego, assumptions, bias, preconceived ideas, all of it, you need to take out so that you can read the text for what it is. And by doing that, you'll be able to get a much fuller view of the text before you start analysing it and evaluating it. So that was actually the first lot of findings. Well, findings, brainstorm, bringing ideas together. So I'm thinking, actually I spent a lot of time just staring at the page and going, okay, how does this link together, and how does this link to what I already know? And that's thinking. It's about trying, as the definition says, use one's mind actively to form connected ideas. That's exactly what I'm trying to do, and you'll tell me whether I'm being successful or not. So then my next is delving deeper into critical thinking, and I start looking into, well, what is thinking, and then doing research. So I have a couple of books that I found online, and there will be references as well to these, and I'll link them in the bottom of the notes section of the YouTube video so that you can have a look. And because one of the things is, yes, I have a lot of information in my head, but that's also the thing about doing research and about doing critical thinking, critical reading, is I'm not assuming I know everything, because I don't. I am very aware. Actually, I find the more I learn, the more I realise that there's more depth to it, and I don't know a lot. And so I want to look at who out there has already done what I'm trying to do, and then look at it and be like, okay, and then I'm going to critically think about it. I'm going to critically read the material, because there are different ways we read things. We read things for information. We read things for analysing. We read things for meaning. So like looking through an argument, weighing up the pros and cons. So I'm reading these books for information, for meaning, and to read critically as well, because I'm using these to help further my understanding of what I know and also deepen what I know. And I'll be weighing up, well, has the way they've done it already, is that useful? Is it valuable to me, to this argument and this progression of ideas I'm developing, and to what I can teach you? If it can deepen what I already know, that can deepen how I teach and provide you with something more valuable. So then I started looking further into another source I found, which was a really great website called www.criticalreading.com. Oh, and the book I just mentioned is by a lady called Stella Cottrell, and it's all about critical thinking. It was a really great book, and it's like a textbook as well. So it's got examples, and I've used some of them in my lessons. It's really fascinating. But the thing I'm going to talk about now is this website and looking into thinking and reading and the differences between them. And one of the things is that critical reading, critical thinking gets mixed up. And I mean, I thought about it together like that as well, but I wanted to find what is the distinction between critical reading and critical thinking. And it goes back to this definitions, where reading is about the discovery of information, and thinking is about actively connecting ideas. So the reading must come first. If we're thinking about analysing a piece of text, the reading must come first, because if you don't know what it says, how can you think critically about it? You can't. And when we're thinking as well, it becomes a much more evaluative process. You're looking at the evidence that they're giving you, and you're thinking, well, did it support the argument? Is it valid? You're assessing. It's very active. in your mind, and you should use your brain. And then with the reading, which is a guy called Dan Curlin says, well, the reading is you're finding out how well does the text do what it says it does. And I thought that was really interesting. Does it? And I mean, in a way you are assessing it, but not in the same way in thinking, because you're just thinking, well, what was the aim of the author? Did they achieve it in this book? So if it was, for example, something very simple that we all know about, a recipe. If the recipe was written and you could follow it and come to a dish that you've made, well, the writer achieved their aim in instructing you how to make a dish. If it was all incoherent and the instructions were incomplete or didn't make sense, the writer, the recipe chef, writer would not have achieved their aim. Therefore, it wasn't valid. So the valid was thinking about whether it's complete or coherent, reading through, has it achieved its aim? That's the reading. So this is kind of where I've got to at the moment, and I'm going to do a bit more because I'm going to look into one of the things that my students who already have lessons with me, many of them know about, is my little triangle of layers of meaning. And when I'm looking at critical reading and thinking, so some of my students will be familiar with this. There'll be a video going up about this probably in the next few weeks. It's all about how do you analyse a text. And I wrote this originally for analysing literature, but it is basically a process to think about how you can think and read critically a piece of literature, because you need to understand the text, you need to read the text, you need to state what you see, you need to look at associations that what's written relates to, because how we understand our world isn't just singular, it's related to our past experiences, our cultures, because our information of our world is built through experience. Much of it is, pretty much all of it. I mean, some of it you'll get through reading, things like that, but a full understanding is usually when you've used the information. And then the third layer is about a writer's purpose. You're thinking, well, what did they want to achieve when they were writing this piece? So if I'm looking at literature, it's what I wrote it for. It's, were they trying to influence society? Were they trying to comment on something? And then the final layer is the essential meaning of the text. What does the text come down to in its essence? What themes is the writer exploring? What do the characters learn? And then what do we learn? So if we were applying this to critical reading, again, it starts with questions. You're looking, well, what is it in essence this text is trying to tell me? And it's the implicit meaning, so implicit. And this is when we're looking at thinking and reading critically, is we're going from explicit meaning, which is the surface level, what can you see, what's written there, down to the implicit level, which is when you start to read between the lines. And this is really where the critical thinking comes into play, because you're going to start evaluating information, evaluating evidence, and deciding whether it is valid, it is strong, it is weak, whether it supports the writer's argument, and you'll start coming to your own conclusion. So I wrote this layers of meaning triangle, like pyramid, to help my students understand that process, and it relates to what I'm doing here. And it's only actually really through doing more of this research into critical thinking that I have then started to connect this idea that, well, this pyramid that I've developed for my students actually relates more generally and can be applied in more situations, which was quite exciting actually when I discovered that, because I had a feeling that it could be used, but it's only really it's the conscious versus unconscious. So here I'm consciously going, okay, how can it be applied? And now I'm thinking about it critically, and then I'm going to start testing and saying, okay, how does it hold up? How does it relate to the other information out there in the field, what the other writers have done, and where does it fit? So this is where I'm going next. I'm going to continue with researching critical thinking and reading. The next the next steps I'll be doing, if I look back at my notes, I'll also be doing about time management, writing, how to write, how can you communicate your thoughts effectively, sentence structure, planning, how do you organize, research, how do you do good research, and how do you do good note taking. But all of this stems to critical thinking and reading, because those principles that you have when you're thinking and reading critically, you have to apply if you're going to have good time management, because you're going to need to assess whether what you're doing is relevant and whether you're using your time efficiently. You are going to need to use these critical thinking and reading skills to writing, planning, and research, because again, you need to understand what has been written, then what you are writing, and also evaluate whether it's any good or not. And the same with note taking. And we'll look at how can you be efficient, how can you ask questions, how can you start letting your mind evaluate what you've got, what you've read, and then how do you comprehend that. So that is where I'm going right now. That is part 2 of the vlog. And if you like this video, if you found it valuable, interesting, or just a little bit amusing, I have no clue, feel free to subscribe so that you can keep up to date with notifications. I currently have, I think, 2 or 3 subscribers, so please sign up so I don't look like a loner. I ask my students to do that too, because 1 or 2 subscribers, yes, I know, everybody looks at a YouTuber and it's like, well, they've only got 2 subscribers. But yeah, if you found it valuable, feel free to subscribe, like. If you've got questions, leave it in the comments and I'll do my best to answer it in the following videos. So that's it for today, and I'm going to be signing off now because it's 7:30. I've done my last bit of work. I'm going to have some wine, and then we shall carry on with lockdown, because what else can you do? Okay, that's it. Enjoy lockdown. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment and like, and check out some of the other videos. Okay, bye-bye for now.